Coming in August, Stargate, and so much more. Now, it isn't going to be the Stargate with Richard Dean Anderson or Michael Shanks. It's actually going to be the Stargate program by the military. I've also had to switch to a bigger basket for the books because I've also been finding in a number of tie-ins. And I just realized before starting this video, I have to grab one more on crop circles to add in here. So August is going to be an interesting month, and I'm going to be giving some summaries on the different books I'm going to mention. I also have a guest, Enzo, on August the 1st at 3 p.m. If you haven't seen him before, he is an amazing individual who has been studying this topic as well as others for a variety of years, and he's just such a wealth of information. So be sure to tune in to that. If you're not able to attend during the time we live, be sure to do the rewatch because Enzo has so much fascinating information to share, including how he helped me figure out what this actually was. And it isn't what I thought, although I was aware that we were having the Perseid meteor showers at the time. So what is coming in August? We have The Uninvited, an expose of the alien abduction phenomena. This is by Nick Pope, and I still need to reread this, and it was my first introduction to Nick Pope. He used to work in the British military. I didn't originally have this book listed, but I'm including Monster Hunters. This is by Tia Krulos, on the trail with ghost hunters, Bigfooters, ufologists, and other paranormal investigators. Now, the reason that I've included this book, and it isn't just because of the ufologists, and I'll talk a bit more about it when I get to the works about Skinwalker Ranch, there's a lot of stuff and cryptids that are going to tie in with that. So I need to reread Monster Hunters. Then we have Encounter in Rendlesham Forest. This is also by Nick Pope, and it's with John Burroughs and Jim Penniston. They're both United States Air Force, retired. They were serving in Britain at the time. So we'll get more into what's going on with this. And I found it fascinating as I reread the Skinwalker books that this wasn't mentioned, because there are correlations, not just that it involved the military, not just that this book, like Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, needed military approval, but for some reason, those other authors didn't touch on this, and I'll get more into that with those books. They Are Already Here, which I've mentioned. This is by Sarah Scholes. I've just reread it. I'm not sure who did some of the research. I've been looking into some of the other names and people that she's mentioned. I originally, like Rendlesham Forest, borrowed these from the library, decided they would be great reference books, and bought my own copies. I am glad that I bought this one, but there are a lot of things that stand out in terms of not following through properly on checking individuals out. And I'll talk more about why it bothers me that she didn't include John B. Alexander's work in this, because his work's published in 2011, hers is 2020. There's been a lot of things coming up reading these books with a different mindset in the last few weeks. It is worth the read. Her focus isn't so much on trying to find answers about UFOs, but trying to find answers about why are people interested in UFOs and what keeps them going. Now, I will say, thanks to her, I discovered Chris Rukowski, who is a Canadian astronomer in Manitoba. He's been investigating for years. He puts together the Canadian UFO survey every year. He's been doing it for 34 years. And I just happened to know that because I watched him on a video on YouTube just a short while ago, and the survey came out a few months ago. The podcaster is from the east coast of Canada, so it was rather nice to see Canadians talking about UFOs, because typically the information that we get is either from America or Britain. There's very little in terms of Canadian books. There is one that I know of that's by John Robert Colombo. Rukowski has also written books, so I need to start searching that more. I'll hold these together as they're the same authors. They both involve Skinwalker Ranch. Hunt for Skinwalker was published in 2005, the year after NIDS stopped being an organization and doing the research. Skinwalkers at the Pentagon includes James T. Lacatski, who is from one of the organizations, and the other two authors are Colm Kelleher and George Knapp. There were a lot of things that came up about these two books, reading them in this case for the third time, and in this case the second time, especially after, and I'll talk about it when I get to John B. Alexander's book, how funding happens, different people who are involved. Some of it to me seems like it's just fear-mongering. In this book, they talk a lot more about the paranormal and things happening with people who have been to the ranch and what happens when they go home. That isn't something that was touched on at all in Hunt for the Skinwalker. In Skinwalker, they're talking a lot about the medical issues that people who were either in contact with orbs or family members of people who had been at the ranch suddenly come up with autoimmune issues and other medical issues, which is why I say it's interesting in this book they didn't refer back to Rendlesham Forest, where there's also issues with the two Air Force officers who were involved in that sighting. So I've made notes. I'll talk more about it because there's just some, to me, really sketchy things and cherry picking information that wasn't included. They talk about the show on the History Channel. I'm not sure if that has to do with Robert Bigelow, who hasn't owned the ranch since 2016. They briefly mentioned the new owner in Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. What I will say is, obviously, paranormal, over-the-top stuff definitely increases your property value. We discover that Robert Bigelow sold the property in 2016 for over $4 million. I think we've just figured out maybe not what's going on at the Skinwalker Ranch, but why there are people who are happy to say their properties have paranormal and other activity going on there. I'll talk more in detail about them. The other book, and I don't have the actual cover anymore, this is UFOs, Myths, Conspiracies, and Realities. This is by John B. Alexander. I have quite a few pages marked. I still have a little bit to finish. But before I finished this, I decided to go back and read the two Skinwalker books, as well as They're Already Here, I want to read Rendlesham and Monster Hunters again, as well as The Uninvited. And part of my change of opinion, not that I thought there was really much going on at Skinwalker UFO wise anyway, but part of the change of my opinion reading these books and what I was looking for this time in particular, John B. Alexander was part of NIDS, the organization that Robert Bigelow began and funded from his own pocket to do research at the Skinwalker Ranch as well as other anomalies and locations. I'm mentioning that because although 2 of the books are specific about that research and their findings, there's very little mention of John B. Alexander. The same goes for the book with Sarah Scholes, who looked quite a bit at Skinwalker Ranch, Robert Bigelow, that whole situation, and again, just glosses over John B. Alexander. I find that interesting because not only is he former military, involved in the research, but he very much lays out in this book how funding happens. So in terms of all the different organizations, all the different levels you have to talk to, all the different groups that are competing for funding, it's definitely well worth the read. Now, I'm sure some people will say, oh, we just made up part of it, yada yada, company line, whatever. I still think you need to read it because unlike some of these that are, like I said, fear-mongering, this very much lays out, and I appreciated it because I live in Canada. Our government works very differently. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it works well or that we don't have our waste of air, but our system works very differently from the American system with the House of Representatives and their senates and all the different committees, and the military is far more extensive than anything we have. You have, well, what's called the intelligence community, but I think we've all seen over the decades that doesn't work very well between poor communication or whatever you want to say involved the boondoggles they've been involved in. And I found it interesting that after events, instead of cleaning things up in the existing organizations like the CIA and the FBI, no, let's make a third organization. So, instead of the left hand not knowing what the right hand's doing, now we've got a hand on a whole other creature somewhere else. I just can't figure some things out. But in any case, I will definitely be covering John Alexander, in particular with the gaps that are missing, because with the exception of Hunt for the Skinwalker, those other books were published after John B. Alexander. I'm really disappointed because George Knapp is supposed to be this amazing journalist who delves into things. Well, if I could find some of this stuff, why couldn't he? He's got access to a whole lot more than I do and probably can afford to pay people to get information. So that's why I mentioned that there's definitely some cherry picking going on, and not just with Knapp, with Sarah Scholes as well. Another book that I'll be covering is from the Mysteries of the Unknown Time Life series, UFO Phenomena. I enjoyed reading this. I have a number of books from this series that I need to read. It's been great reading these older books compared to what some of the new things are coming out, and I'm really looking forward to delving into a lot of the information. The one thing that I should mention, and this is from Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, is that they have a list of abbreviations. If you saw my earlier video about pulling information together and what I want to cover, I started doing that on a mind web, so I definitely need to make a copy of this for reference. I will give them a kudos for that because that was a huge time saver, as those agencies and short forms come up through many of the books. Like I say, there are a ton of different organizations, agencies within agencies within agencies. I mean, I don't know about trying to figure out UFOs, just trying to figure out all the agencies is mind-boggling enough. Now, as I had gotten through some of those, like I said, I still need to reread a couple of books there. I was thinking yesterday, as I was finishing up Skinwalker at the Pentagon, I also had another book which I hadn't included in the basket, and I just read this a while ago. This is Roswell, Uncovering the Secrets of Area 51 and the Fatal UFO Crash. And this is by Rupert Matthews. I will be going through it again, even though I just read it a little while ago. This is from 2009, so before Alexander Scholes, but after Hunt for the Skinwalker. I'm very curious to see what they talk about in here, because of course there is mention in Hunt for the Skinwalker about Area 51 and the military and so many different things. What I do like about this book as well, it has Appendix A, the list of characters, so the people who are all involved in those different events. But then it also has Appendix B, which is the timeline for what was happening. And again, this is going to be a great resource because as I try and connect this in with the timelines of Skinwalker, in with timelines of other things, I also need to read Crop Circles. This is by Steve and Karen Alexander, Signs, Wonders, and Mysteries. This ties in, of course, with UFOs and the different studies. Oh, and I just noticed because I wrote on the front, this was a gift from one of the schools that I had left in 2006. That makes this book extra special. This is published in 2006. Again, it comes up before a number of these other books. I know I've come across, there were a couple of people who did come forward and admit that they were responsible for the making so many of those crop circles, but they couldn't have done all of them because they didn't just appear in Britain. I'm not saying it's UFOs. That is a quick overview of what will be coming up in August. I may end up covering some of these books partway into September as I get videos done. I'll certainly be updating the videos as time goes on, as I track down more information. There's also another book that I'm almost finished listening to as an audiobook. That's Extraterrestrial by Avi Loeb, and it talks about the object Oumuamua that was discovered in October 2017. That will connect in with these books as well, because three of them make a big hoo-ha about the New York Times article that was published in December 2017, when a number of things came out, like the Tic Tac episode that involved I don't know the first letters, but it's Nimitz, one of the ships. It was the footage that people have been talking about for a little while now, and the military and secret programs and funding, and one name was given to who got the money, but it's actually another agency that got it. And this is what happens when things are clandestine. Try and keep them secret, and then people's imagination runs wild. Conspiracy theorists get hold of things, and it just becomes a big mess. Anyway, if you're looking forward to August and you've enjoyed this video, be sure to give that like button a little tickle. Have you read any of the books that I've mentioned? Do you have a favorite author who talks about UFOs, cryptids, that type of thing? Be sure to leave their name in the comments down below, or the title of the book, as I'm always looking for my next great read. If you haven't subscribed yet and you enjoy content of a bookish nature, nature videos, or silly cats, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you know when I upload content that may be of interest to you. And until next time, be sure to keep an eye on the sky and take good care.